Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and I'm ready to talk about Dragon Warrior. Although that's what I call it here in America, it's better known as the first game in the series Dragon Quest. It's the granddaddy of all JRPGs, and would set the foundational template for introducing a more advanced and interactive presentation to a wider audience. Even Final Fantasy took the inspiration to heart, going as far as to reference Urgic by name through a grave in one of the towns, at least for the NES version of the game. Developed by Chunsoft in 1986 for the NES, the main effort behind it was to expose Japan to the Western-dominated genre of RPGs, and also to expand its appeal beyond those pesky computer-crunching nerds. Games like Wizardry and Ultima were cited as inspirational material for Dragon Quest's gameplay, but whereas those games were statistical to the wire in how you proceeded and evaluated the situations, Dragon Quest simplified its systems and display so it could appeal to any kind of gamer. You didn't need any experience with D&D, I sure don't, just the intuition of associating yourself with the hero and going on a more story-driven journey than usual. Now, although I've played a good number of Final Fantasies, this is the only Dragon Quest game I've played, specifically the NES version. I wanted to start with the original release instead of the remakes, so my blind playthrough could be as authentic as possible. Plus, this box art is raw as hell and you can't convince me otherwise. Either that, or I don't want to be dealing with the random prestidigitator kind of names that they go by in the remakes. In a blind playthrough, I first beat the game all the way back in March this year, while writing down every piece of information I got and dying a total of 7 times along the way. Since then, I played the game 2 more times, recording the 3rd playthrough for this review. And, like with Final Fantasy, I'll be dividing the review into chapters, so I can cover each part of the game in a reasonable sequence. I've got 5 chapters lined up, and although the scope of the story is pretty small, there's still plenty to discuss with gameplay. So grab some food, sit back, and let's explore the realm of Alefgard in Dragon Warrior. Coming onto this title screen gives you a nice fanfare, the introduction to the game's proud opening theme. It feels really nostalgic, with that dragon poking out of the D and the ever-frequent sparkles, even though I never played this game prior in my life. It's also an introduction to the game's charming and simplistic OST. There aren't too many songs, and most of them only use 2 channels for melodies instead of 3, but they do a good job of grabbing your attention. The main castle theme and town theme are very happy and catchy, while the overworld theme is something I like to imagine the hero walking to the beat of. There's also little jingles everywhere, like for when you get cursed by a weird belt, play instruments in your inventory, create a big rainbow, or even get fruity with the princess. This also ties into the game's presentation, which is bright and joyous. Lots of enemies have goofy designs that make them stand out, such as the slime's kooky smile, the wyvern's mutated body, and stocky builds for the knights and golems. The NES version of the game, Dragon Warrior, saw more benefits to its graphics from the original Famicom release, such as character sprites being more expressive and dynamic. I didn't even know that Japan had different looks at first, and I'll be honest, when I first saw these, I thought they were toys. I'm not sure if I could stomach 3 playthroughs having to look at these all the time. I would say Dragon Quest is more cutesy overall with its character designs, at least in comparison to Final Fantasy's more deliberate and detailed aesthetic. When you first enter the game, you're greeted by good old King Lorik of Tantagel Castle. He not only gives you the gist on what's going down in the realm of Alefgard, but he does so with a delightful dialect of thous and thees. In fact, pretty much everybody in the game speaks like this, including the narrator of enemy battles, and from what I can tell, it's a trait unique to the Western release of Dragon Warrior, which I'm happy about because it gives the game a signature identity and some memorable humor to go with it. Me and my friends still quote the level up text every now and then in my Discord server, so that's gotta mean something. King Lorik himself is a nice ally, one you will be touching base with throughout the entire game. In being the only way for you to save your progress, a Western exclusive feature that replaced the password system, King Lorik encourages frequent saving of your progress, and it's charming how these are done. Each of the 3 save files are called adventure logs, written by King Lorik himself in the Imperial Scrolls of Honor. No matter how many times he says it, the imagery still puts a smile on my face. His home of Tantagel Castle is also home to a wizard who can restore your MP for free, and once you get the spell of Heal at level 3 to restore your health, he pulls a lot of weight in helping you save on money and time. There's also an emphasis on gathering as much information as possible from NPCs to know what to do. King Lorik makes the main objective very clear. You must defeat the Dragon Lord and recover the Ball of Light to save Alefgard. When you go into the open world, you can even see the Dragon Lord's castle on the other side of the ocean. But this objective is far out of reach right now, so you need to break it down into smaller objectives and work those out first. You are on your own, and you need to gather as much information as you can to solve them. However, there's one problem with this that became really apparent on replay, and that the novelty of talking to NPCs and immersing with the world can very easily disappear on a replay. Once you know your objectives from the get-go, there are only a small number of NPCs you actually have to talk to, and a few locations you can skip completely, so everything feels very minor in the grand scheme of things compared to grinding it out in battle. Speaking of which, you will be having to do a lot of battles in order to get comfortable moving around other areas to deal with tougher enemies. As such, despite being a poorly disguised number game, Dragon Warrior delivered a JRPG in its most simplistic form. Every battle is a one-on-one to see if you could defeat the enemy or at the very least survive running away. You only have 4 commands: regular attacks, magic spells, items to use, and running away. Enemy encounters are pretty straightforward, and although it mostly boils down to you being stronger or not, there are situations where you do have to plan in advance based on what the enemy is capable of, and it feels really good when things work out. However, this battle system is also where the game's numerous shortcomings come into play, which I'll go into detail with over time. Because every fight is a one-on-one, any undesirable randomness can really screw you over. Your attack misses, your spell doesn't work, your running away keeps getting blocked. Anything that fails will count as a missed turn and give the enemy a free chance to attack you or debilitate you. Now, after you leave Tantagel Castle and buy some weapons and armor at Breckenary, you're going to want to farm up for a few levels in the neighboring forest. Slimes are easy enough enemies, but as early as this part of the game, you'll notice a problem with encounter frequency. It's inconsistent. You can either hear the overworld theme loop once or even twice with no encounters, or get several enemies in a row per step. Not only does this make both the grinding and moving from place to place occasionally frustrating, but it also affects the performance of armors later in the game, like the magic armor that auto-heal you as you walk. So as you buy weapons and armor from the shops of Breckenary and Garenham in the northwest, spells are automatically learned on level up, and you can get competent spells to either damage or incapacitate enemies. Hurt kinda sucks and never really scales past 15 damage, but will help in doing big damage to the relatively tough magicians at levels 4 through 6. Sleep is where you really start standing on your own against beefier enemies, as you can tucker out the heavy hitters and whittle down their HP bit by bit. Stop spell is also useful for sealing off the obnoxious spells that enemies can use, like the full restoring Heal More. That and the enemies are stupid enough to waste turns trying to use their blocked spells. Oh, and don't be fooled by the 20 to 30 damage enemies can do to you with Hurt More. Your Hurt More does more than double that and is absolutely worth being the last spell, letting you finally have something stronger than your regular attacks. It's like your own personal weaponized FU. Now you should be getting more comfortable with traveling through the open world. You've been making trips from Garenham back to Tantagel Castle. Now you're ready to head east to Cole and see what's there. The open world is nicely designed in that it's completely open and free-flowing. The only place you're directly barred from entering is the Dragon Lord's castle, otherwise it's free game provided you're strong enough. To telegraph this, the world uses bridges to communicate the presence of stronger enemies, which is a nice way of giving you a warning ahead of time. However, the telegraph isn't all that effective in certain areas, like the bridge below Remuldar, or the bridge leading down to Hawksness. This is because with the way the encounters are set up across the world map, stronger enemies may appear much earlier than the bridge you're crossing, or way after you cross it. In my first playthrough, a few deaths were to me exploring too far south of Garenham, despite me having not crossed the bridge. A few towns also have areas where NPCs can easily get stuck in narrow hallways, like in Garenham and Cole. For those that move around on their own, they do not have a check that recognizes areas with collision as something to avoid moving into, and may get stuck trying to move in a certain direction, without realizing that they aren't going anywhere. You can't force NPCs out of your way if you push against them either, so in tight areas, you will just have to wait for them to find their way out of your way. By now, you'll have stumbled upon a cave in the desert. This is Erdrick's Cave, where you learn of 3 mystical items that your ancestor has left in the hands of 3 old men. With no enemies here, it is basically a tutorial for how caves and dungeons are designed, showing off some really cool and intimidating ideas. Every dungeon is pitch black until you either use a torch to light up a small area, or cast Radiant to illuminate a much bigger radius for a limited time. The way their layouts are designed might have you bumping around a lot with just the torch, so Radiant comes in handy with exploring these areas. Really cool using that spell for the first time, by the way. The music also gets lower in pitch when you enter the next floor, really adding a sense of uneasiness as you descend deeper and deeper. Unfortunately, there are only a small number of dungeons in the game, with only 2 of them feeling like a substantial area to actually get through. The rest are really short and only have 1 to 2 floors. Erdrick's Cave and this mountain cave below Garenham are optional in the grand scheme of things. Although I go to the latter once I hit level 10 to comfortably grind off warlocks for now that I have Stop Spell. I could instead be traveling to Remuldar to fight that same enemy and stronger ones like wolves and metal scorpions. There are also some bugged items that I don't know how they really work. You can buy and equip a dragon scale as early as Breckenary, and apparently it's supposed to protect against fire breaths? I mean, they do 10 to 15 damage all around, so I guess it is working? I know you can't wear multiple scales and drip yourself out, but I never got hit by fire breaths without a scale equipped, so I don't know. The Fighter's Ring is exclusive to the Mountain Cave, and apparently it's supposed to increase chances for an excellent move, but it just doesn't work at all. The Swamp Cave leading from Cole to Remuldar is also home to a random green dragon ambush. If you explore the wrong path, something I ended up doing on my blind run and having no idea there was a wrong path to begin with, the green dragon appears in every tile you come across until he is beaten. This is a late game enemy appearing out of nowhere in an early game cave, with no indication other than the vague hints of the princess being held captive in an eastern cave somewhere. Yes, the princess may be there, but nobody said anything about a guardian popping out of nowhere to eat you alive for wandering off the boring straight line downwards. Oh yeah, there's this one idiot in Cole. I hate this guy. He's guarded by poisonous marsh that drains your health, so it looks like he's special and important. Over the course of the game, he keeps telling me I need to get stronger in order to have a chance against the Dragon Lord, so I kept in touch with him throughout the entire game. Then, when I'm at full power and have the best equipment available, he does diddly squat. All I get is a, now you're ready to face the Dragon Lord. Like, dude, I went into his castle to retrieve my ancestral sword, and all you have to say is, now I'm ready? I was honestly expecting a big gift like a buttload of EXP or even permanent stat boosts to have an edge over the Dragon Lord, but instead, I feel betrayed giving this guy my prolonged attention. Anyway, around this point of the game is where you start learning about spells that supplement your travels in very convenient ways, and it honestly surprised me that I had options that were this easily accessible compared to Final Fantasy not really giving you them at all. Outside is an immediate escape dungeon button, perfect for leaving one of the bigger dungeons whenever you want instead of having to fight your way out. Return does what I thought it would do and immediately transports you back to Tantagel Castle for an easy rest up. Repel wards off enemies in the overworld that are weaker than you for a certain number of steps, which was really handy and convenient for heading out of Tantagel Castle and not having to be slowed down by enemies with diminishing returns. The latter two spells also have consumable items that fill out the same function, like Wyvern Wings and Fairy Water. Good thing about this is that both of them you can get much earlier than the respective spells, and that makes it so when you actually learn the spell, it's more satisfying overall. It does suck that Repel has no effect in caves, at least the smaller ones. I understand why, so you don't skip past enemy combat, but I take issue with this because the Swamp Cave is an area necessary to pass through in order to get from Tantagel Castle to Charlock Castle. There is no other method of transportation besides walking through the open world, so Repel is my only way to hasten the progress, and it doesn't work in a cave filled with weak enemies like ghosts and scorpions. There's also a very limited inventory space for certain consumables, like herbs and magic keys. Why only 6 at a time? That's so oddly specific for a set number, especially with the herbs being the only way of healing in dungeons, besides using MP for heal and heal more. To my recollection, I think the town of Remuldar is where the game starts getting more creative with its humor here and there. Although some NPCs won't give necessary info to progress, there are some that might get a chuckle out of you. Remuldar has two partners that are both opposite of the town and complaining about each other, as couples do. And the good thing about Remuldar is it sells magic keys, allowing you to unlock doors of previous areas. These include Tantagel Castle, which had 4 chests teasing you from the very start. To your dismay, though, these chests only contain 10 to 12 gil, likely karma from ignoring the nearby guy's advice not to steal. Garenham has a whole settlement that you can enter now, and one of its interests is 2 guards locked behind another door. However, the guards simply tell you to ask the other one for advice in an endless loop. They're clearly pranking you. It's stuff like this where the game really just wants you to have a good time. On a side note, that bath where you can find the fairy's flute apparently can cure rheumatism. I had to look up what that actually was, because I don't think you can get afflicted with that in the game. South of Remuldar also introduces one of 2 funny gimmick enemies, the Goldman. He's beefier than other enemies in the area, but if you can beat him consistently, you'll be crazy rich, and that kind of income is necessary to save up for the valuable magic armor. The other gimmick enemy is the Metal Slime, opposite of Goldman by having the highest EXP payload. The enemy itself is very weak and more often than not runs away, but the catch is its maxed out defense stat. It's so high that physical attacks can straight up fail to make a dent, and you'll be lucky to even deal 1 damage. This does get easier and easier with level ups, and by level 22 or 23, you'll start doing 2 or even 3 damage to them. During my 3rd playthrough, I decided to count how many metal slimes I killed, and after ending up with a total of 21, I can say it definitely gets easier if you stay with them to grind it out. I mentioned before that Goldman will help out in saving up for the magic armor, and that's my transition to this next point. Compared to level ups, new weapons and armor do not boost your stats very much. I made sure to pay attention to these stat growths, and only a few of them actually give an increase of plus 10 or more, so it's a sour feeling you have to sit through. Looking at the magic armor I was talking about earlier, this is a big jump in price from the previous armor, a full plate. Although it does regenerate HP with every 4 or so steps you take, there is no increase in defense power coming from the full plate. It sucks. In a general sense, enemies give very little EXP unfortunately. The curve overall going from weaker to stronger enemies does not reflect their progression in strength, and that ultimately means that level ups take way longer than they need to be. Metal Slimes have the highest payload but only give 115 EXP, while the rest of the tougher enemies give 30 to 50, which is really small given what you have to go through. Look at the freaking Golem, a boss enemy that only appears once in the entire game, is tied with red dragons for the highest strength among enemies, and has a specific condition to defeat him, but all he gives is 5 EXP, the same as a Magidraki fought very early on in the game. You probably saw this next one coming, but yes, this game is the definition of a grind. It's not so bad going from levels 1 to 13, because they are shorter to reach and always have viable equipment to work for within the hour. But after that, every level will take a full hour to reach on their own, as each threshold requires 3,000 to 4,000 EXP. Compare that to the 30 to 50 average payout I mentioned, possibly less if you go to a safer area, and you could chalk up why this can get boring. You're also subjected to a very repetitive battle theme, which you'll be hearing for over half of your playtime. Your defense against enemy attacks is also inconsistent with how much range the enemy damage is capable of. This range can be as large as over 10 and as short as 1, so seeing those numbers doesn't make me feel confident. Wyverns are a primary example in their region. They do more damage than all others in that area, but once you hit level 12 or 13, they just stop hitting for double digits and become pushovers. It's so weird how enemies have a threshold that nerfs them completely. I also noticed this with knights once I hit level 20 compared to 19. Another flaw is a pretty substantial one regarding the game's overall design. To quote my good friend Lin Hero, a personal big fan of this game, he coined a special term that has stuck with me ever since he brought it to my attention, and that term is called taste testing. This refers to the important key items you come across, and what he meant is that almost every key item is only ever used once in the entire game. The main exception is magic keys, where you can backtrack to different areas and open their doors. Beyond that, valuable items like the Stones of Sunlight and the Staff of Rain have no secondary purpose. They just sit in your inventory begging to be used. And honestly, in my first playthrough, I tried so many times to use the Staff of Rain, expecting it to do something in addition to its eventual exchange. The Staff of Rain was also something I got way before the Stones of Sunlight, only because the latter is very well hidden, which I'll touch upon in a bit. The Silver Harp is an item you find in Garen's grave in order to trade it for the Staff of Rain, and although I couldn't think of a better place in the video to talk about this item, admittedly, it's worth mentioning, as the Silver Harp does have a funny use of automatically summoning an enemy to engage in battle. The title of this chapter is a bit of an irony, because while there is a lot of cool stuff, there's an astronomical spike in difficulty. The areas around Hawksness and Cantillon, the next towns of interest, have cracked out enemies that kill the pacing and slow it down to a halt. In my playthrough, I got through Garen's grave at level 13 with no issues against the enemies. Most of them except the Wraith Knight did 10% or less of my max HP. A self-imposed rule that I follow to make sure dealing with these enemies for a long time frame is smooth. To play it safe, I did grinding off recording all the way up to level 19, in fact spending an entire day just grinding to that level without recording whatsoever, because there was nothing interesting to record. By level 15 or 16, Wraith Knights stopped doing big damage, but at level 19, that's when I went out to Cantillon and Hawksness to check them out. Once I got there, enemies like the Knight, Demon Knight, and Mage Wyvern were still doing over 10% of my HP. The jump in strength from the previous tier of enemies to this tier is excessive. But let's focus on some good stuff. As I've said, the game does a lot of impressive and creative puzzles, especially with how small the size of the cartridge is. 3 noteworthy puzzles include finding the Stones of Sunlight, using the Fairy's Flute, and finding Erdrick's Token. The Stones of Sunlight are rumored to be in Tantagel Castle, and can be found as early as using magic keys to enter the next area. However, you are never told where they are specifically, it's all on you to find them yourself. It took me so long to find it in my blind run that I think it was the last key item that I got overall, because this thing is super well hidden. I tried searching every tile of this new area, but then I remembered about checking the perimeter of the castle. It was something you had to do in Remuldar in order to get keys in the first place. So ultimately finding the cellar leading to the Stones of Sunlight was something I was proud of for finally coming across the solution on my own. The Fairy's Flute is a little more straightforward. You are told in Cole that Golem gets put to sleep by it, but you're told in the next town over, Remuldar, how to get it. It's quite a while until you actually face the golem, and it's memorable in being the only part of the game where you use a key item in battle, in this case to put the golem to sleep. Finding Erdrick's token is another really interesting puzzle, as when I first learned about how to do it, it completely whiplashed me. 70 steps south and 40 steps west of Tantagel Castle is all I got. Now, with my blind run, I took it upon myself to count all of these steps manually, and in hindsight, I'm glad I did, because another way to solve this puzzle, which I didn't even put in the picture, was to use Gwaelin's Love. The princess not only keeps track of the EXP you need to level up, but also mentions how many steps you are from Tantagel Castle. Really oddly specific of a function, but I'm glad of there being another way to find Erdrick's token like that. There's plenty of cool set pieces to enjoy too. The ghost town of Hawksness is very intriguing once you first get inside it expecting a new town. It's abandoned, dungeon music plays, and tough enemies patrol the ruins. It's only when you visit Cantlin can you learn what to do in there, and part of that involving exploration of Hawksness is terrifying but well worth the reward, if you can survive. One of the enemies here is a green dragon, the same one found in that swamp cave earlier on. Once you defeat one, you are free to explore that little area in the swamp cave and see why there were green dragons in that cave in the first place. Wait, is that the princess? Am I carrying her back to the castle? That's so cute. I'm glad she becomes so infatuated with my hero for the rescue. Yeah, it's cliche as all hell, but I never say no to her questions. It's funny to see her be incessant about it if you wanted her to, but my hero deserves every inch of that love after all the struggles and grinding he had to do to even talk to her in the first place. Creating the Rainbow Bridge is also satisfying. You get sun and rain to meet in the form of a rainbow drop, and you can easily prove yourself as Erdrick's ancestor with the token. This Rainbow Bridge is the last quest that needs to be done before you can finally infiltrate Charlock, and you get a nice moment of the whole ocean's illuminating colors of that rainbow in a truly magical moment. Speaking of Erdrick, getting all of his equipment is well worth the hassle. Only the token is mandatory to get the rainbow drop, but the rest can further prove your ancestry and give you nice perks, making the adventure much easier. Erdrick's armor is the reward found in Hawksness, and it's by far the best equipment in the game. It allows you to auto-heal 1 HP per step instead of the magic armor's 4 steps, which saves you a lot of MP for grinding or getting back to full power at Tantagel. If you fight the right tier of enemies, you won't have to manually heal at all. You're also protected from harmful terrain like poisonous marsh and I think that's laced with force beams from Mega Man 2, but that saves you so many shortcuts going through the world map. Erdrick's sword is a much better weapon than a freaking flame sword, really powerful overall, and well worth the praise it gets from the townsfolk who say that it can cut through steel. It doesn't have any additional perks besides better damage, but it makes sense why the Dragon Lord tried to stow it away in his castle. Makes it all the more special as the big treasure of the entire dungeon. Now that all the smaller quests are done with, we are ready to storm Charlock, the castle we've been eyeing since the very beginning. Near and inside Charlock are 3 tiers of enemies, separated by how big the gaps in strength are between them, and the weakest tier will be giving you trouble as early as your journey to Cantlin. Even after building myself up to level 20, I still have trouble with the 2 highest tiers. They do over 15 damage consistently and drain the limited resources I have. Trying to get to the Dragon Lord and his castle and have enough resources to win that fight pretty much mandates you to run away from enemies. Even at level 25, enemies like Stonemen and Armored Knights will still be beating the ever-loving crap out of you. Aside from the raw damage, enemy tactics are pretty shallow in that they mostly cast the same spells that you do. Heal More and Hurt More have big numbers, but can easily be shut down with Stop Spell, and enemies that use Stop Spell aren't that dangerous because you're just going to be hitting them anyway. The enemies that cast Sleep, however, are easily the most annoying. See, enemy casted Sleep will always connect. You cannot dodge it and are automatically put to sleep, with Stop Spell being the only way you can stop it from connecting. Once asleep, it's random how long you stay asleep for. Each turn that passes by has a 50-50 chance of waking up or not, so you cannot risk fighting heavy-hitting enemies who have access to this spell. Warlocks will be a big nuisance until you learn Stop Spell, but Magiwyverns and Axe Knights will be a big growing pain for a while. Fighting them enough times means they will sneak in asleep at some point, so you need to make sure you can survive several hits worth of damage, if that ever happens. It's probably one of the biggest contingency plans you have to be ready for going up against these enemies. With this logic, the worst enemy in the game would have to be red dragons. They are horribly overpowered, and not much weaker than the Dragon Lord himself. Even at level 25, you will still be taking 20 to 30 damage a hit from these fellas, as they have the highest strength out of any enemy. And they cast Sleep, because of course they do. Really the only thing they do that isn't debilitating is Breathe Fire, because the 15-ish damage never scales with strength, at least from what I noticed. Stop Spell also works, but they have pretty high resistance to it. The strategy I do is always cast Stop Spell once or maybe twice. If it succeeds, I roll with it. If it fails, I just run because it's not worth staying around. With those negatives out of the way, Charlock Castle's design is nightmarish in the best way possible. The first floor has 2 stairs on the sides that ultimately lead to dead ends, but twist your mind inside out trying to make sense of it. The real entryway is behind the throne room, but even then, the layout of this entire place is so much a maze that you can't really put it into picture without looking like a conspiracist. It's mostly linear from here, however, but there are some paths deviating. One particular highlight is one room that loops infinitely in a straight line, a nice old-fashioned prank, and keep in mind, because there are so many floors, 8 of them, the dungeon music keeps getting lower and lower and lower until it's fully distorted and almost unrecognizable from how disturbing it is. Almost like something out of a creepypasta. The last floor shows the Dragon Lord right away, but you have to make a long trek around. A parallel of seeing his castle at the very beginning. He also has 6 chests in the very center. Chests of minimal value to prolong your journey if you fall for the devil's temptation. Also, what is this place? The structure is very disheveled, with everything floating on the water and the darkness disappearing. It implies you're outside, and the path outside of the castle is broken up of random tiles, deliberately messy and floating along a surface of water. But how? How is it put together? That's my question. Coming across the Dragon Lord himself, King of Kings, he actually gives you a chance to join his side. He already knows your name, and if you say yes, he splits the world into 2 kingdoms while dozing you off into an endless slumber. But obviously you want to say no and initiate the battle. He knows a few magic spells, but sleep is not one of them, so it doesn't matter. He's also physically weaker than the enemies living on this floor, and once I realized that, I had a gut feeling that he had to turn into a dragon. You can't call yourself the Dragon Lord without doing that, and he actually delivers with an impressive boss fight. As a dragon, he looks kinda scary on how imposing he is, along with that final boss music adding to the sudden anxiety. He's so large that the screen can't shake anymore when he damages you. His big fire breaths are so strong they hit for almost 50 damage, and his defense is impressive enough that you'll only be doing 10ish damage, even with Erdrick's sword. Admittedly, the fight is not very deep, because you just need to come into the fight with at least 100 MP to use it on Healmore if you get low enough. But the shock value and presentation of it all makes it a truly memorable finale to the game. Upon killing the Dragon Lord, the game doesn't end right away, but still gives you a satisfying epilogue. Because you retrieve the Ball of Light, all enemies completely disappear from the game, letting you roam without any threats whatsoever. You could use Return to get to Tantagel Castle quicker, but why not take the long way to bask in the satisfaction for a bit longer? You saved the world, experience that freedom for a bit. Once you get to Tantagel Castle, the guards are lined up to play their trumpets, as King Lorik commends you for being the rightful descendant of Erdrick. He even offers his land to you, and for the first and only time in the game, the hero speaks. I thought it was weird at first, but what the hero says is truly selfless. He denies the offer and instead vows to rule a land that he himself finds. He also lovingly takes the princess with him when she offers, provided you weren't some incel celibate and kept saying no until you gave up. That would have made sleeping together really awkward. But hey, apparently Dragon Warrior 2 has you playing as their children, so good on this couple for having a successful, hopefully wholesome relationship. So, in the end, I have 18 pros and 20 cons. Coming into this, I had no knowledge on anything Dragon Quest related, other than the slimes, which I knew about thanks to Mario Sports Mix. After playing this game though, I was impressed with the experience. Yes, it's a much simpler outing than even the first Final Fantasy, but there was a lot of unique ideas on display that was foreign to even a Final Fantasy fan like myself. It's kinda why I kept making comparisons, so I could better recognize the difference in appeal and understand why people would latch on to Dragon Quest for what it is. I wouldn't say this game turned me into a fan though. While it was satisfying to do the whole thing blind for the first time, there were a lot of frustrating elements and harsh truths I had to learn that stretched out playtime way longer than it needed to be. Its importance to the genre cannot be underestimated though, so with that, I'm going to give Dragon Warrior a rating of 5 out of 10. Okay. And that's the end of this video. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. We're so close to that magical 1K milestone, so what are you waiting for? Get on with it! Leave a comment if you have something to say, and as per usual, my Discord server DeMontropolis is in the description. Consider joining if you're new to the channel. After this review gets uploaded, I'll get back into playing and streaming some games for fun, like Shadow Labyrinth. I haven't touched it in a week, only because I've kept myself occupied with this review. I've also thought about trying the Super NES remake of Dragon Quest I that was only released in Japan. I've heard that's the best version, with rebalancing stats and having nicer visuals. The visuals especially are going to be a really nice treat coming out of the NES release and rolling with the more basic graphics. So with that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.